remembered the exact weight of the grocery bags digging into my palms that night. 2 plastic handles, stretched thin, cutting off the circulation to my fingers as I fumbled for my keys in the dark of the hallway. It was a Tuesday, which meant nothing in the grand scheme of things, except that Tuesdays were my late nights at the office, and Tuesdays were the nights my husband Mark had poker with the guys from his old unit. It was our rhythm, our unspoken schedule that kept the marriage humming along without anyone having to ask too many questions. I texted Mark around 7 to ask if he wanted me to grab anything on the way home, and he'd replied with a picture of a half-empty bottle of whiskey and a thumbs-up emoji. That was Mark. Simple, reliable, predictable. It was one of the things I loved about him, actually. After years of dating artists and musicians who thought being late was a personality trait, Mark was a rock. He was a structural engineer who built bridges and overpasses you drove over without ever thinking about, and he had the same quiet, sturdy energy at home. He didn't startle easily, he didn't ask for much, and he had a way of making you feel like everything was going to be okay, just by being in the same room. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in a part of town that was still clinging to its industrial past, while developers circled it like sharks. Exposed brick, concrete ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a parking lot, and, if you squinted, a sliver of the skyline. It was our first real place together, the kind of loft you see in magazines, but never think you'll actually afford. We'd stretched our budget to get it, but it was worth it for the light. The light was incredible in the mornings, and it was the only thing that made waking up at 6 in the morning feel less like a punishment. But that Tuesday, the hallway was dark. The motion sensor light had been flickering for weeks, and the super hadn't gotten around to fixing it yet. I remember thinking I should text him again. I remember shifting the bags to one arm so I could dig through my purse for my keys, the metal zipper catching on the fabric of my coat. I was tired. Not the good kind of tired you feel after a productive day, but the bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that comes from staring at spreadsheets for 9 hours straight, trying to make numbers that didn't want to add up finally behave. I finally found my keys, the familiar weight of the worn-out leather keychain I'd had since college, and slid the key into the lock. It clicked, and I pushed the door open. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't a bad smell exactly, but it was wrong. It was the smell of expensive cologne, something woody and sharp, layered over the faint, sweet scent of vanilla candles I kept on the coffee table. It was a masculine smell, but it wasn't Mark's. Mark wore a cheap deodorant from the drugstore that smelled like soap and nothing else. My eyes adjusted to the dim light. The only source of illumination was the pale blue glow of the television, which was muted and playing some late-night talk show I didn't recognize. The coffee table was a mess. Empty beer bottles, a half-eaten bag of chips, a smeared plate with the remnants of pizza crusts. And there, on the floor, tangled up in a mess of blankets and pillows that had clearly been dragged off the couch, were 2 figures. One of them was my husband. His back was to me, his broad shoulders hunched over, his head bent down. He was wearing the gray t-shirt he'd had since college, the one with the faded logo of a band he didn't even listen to anymore. But it was the other figure that made the grocery bag slip from my fingers and hit the floor with a dull, heavy thud that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. It was Logan. Logan had been my best friend since we were 17 years old, since we'd bonded over a shared hatred of our high school's overly enthusiastic mascot and a mutual love for terrible horror movies. He was the person I called when my car broke down on the side of the highway, the one who showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and a pint of ice cream after my ex-boyfriend cheated on me, the one who stood by me at my wedding and gave a toast that made everyone cry. He was the brother I never had. He was my safety net. And he was leaning over my husband, his hand resting on Mark's shoulder, his face inches from Mark's ear, whispering something I couldn't hear. The intimacy of the pose was staggering. It wasn't the kind of casual touch you'd share with a buddy. It was tender. It was proprietary. It was the kind of touch that made my stomach drop out from under me, leaving a hollow, aching void in its place. For a second, my brain refused to compute what I was seeing. It tried to rationalize it. Logan was drunk. He was staying on our couch. He'd just lost his job and his girlfriend in the same week, and Mark was just being a good friend, comforting him. That was it. That was the narrative I desperately wanted to believe. I was a rational person. I was a project manager. I solved problems. I didn't jump to conclusions. Then Logan moved. He tilted his head, and in the blue glow of the television, I saw his face. His eyes were closed, his expression one of absolute, unfiltered peace. And then he leaned in and pressed his lips to Mark's neck. Not a peck, not a friendly gesture. It was a slow, deliberate kiss, the kind of kiss you give someone when you've mapped every inch of their skin and you know exactly where they like to be touched. Mark didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. He just let out a low, shuddering sigh that was so full of contentment it made my blood run cold. He reached up, and his fingers tangled in Logan's messy dark hair. He pulled him closer.
I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to storm in there and demand an explanation, to start a fight that would shake the walls and wake the neighbors. But I couldn't move. My feet were glued to the floor. My voice was trapped in my throat. I was a spectator in my own life, watching a scene from a nightmare unfold in front of me. The first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was betrayal. But it was a cold, clinical kind of betrayal. It was the feeling of a foundation crumbling beneath your feet. Mark was my foundation. Logan was my bedrock. And they had just turned into quicksand, ready to swallow me whole. I looked at the scene again, trying to find the logic. Logan had been crashing on our couch for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of him moping around, wearing the same sweatpants, playing video games with Mark at all hours of the night. I'd felt sorry for him. I'd brought him coffee in the morning and made sure he ate something. I told him he could stay as long as he needed. I'd been the good friend, the supportive wife. I was such a fool. My mind started racing, connecting dots I hadn't even known were there. The way Logan and Mark would go quiet when I walked into the room. The way they'd look at each other across the dinner table, sharing some secret joke I was never in on. The way Logan's mood seemed to lift whenever Mark walked through the door. I thought they were just getting along well. I'd been relieved, honestly. I was so worried about Logan, and seeing him bond with Mark made me feel like I had the 2 most important men in my life together in one place. It felt like a blessing. It was a knife in my back. I finally found my voice, but it came out as a whisper, a pathetic, choked little sound that was barely louder than a breath. What the hell? They both froze. It was like watching a movie being paused. Logan's hand was still in Mark's hair. Mark's head was still tilted back. They were like 2 deer caught in the headlights of a car that was about to run them over. Time stretched out for an eternity, the silence in the room so thick you could choke on it. Mark was the first to move. He scrambled back, away from Logan, his eyes wide with a panic I'd never seen on his face before. He was a mess. His hair was disheveled, his face was flushed, and there was a dazed look in his eyes, like he'd just woken up from a dream and couldn't figure out where he was. "Babe," he stammered, holding his hands up. Hey, it's not what you think." The audacity of it, the sheer gut-wrenching audacity. It was exactly what I thought. I had eyes, I had a brain, and what I was seeing was my husband, the man I had promised to spend the rest of my life with, tangled up with my best friend in the middle of our living room floor. "Oh, it's not?" I said, my voice trembling. My heart was hammering so hard against my ribs, I was sure it was going to crack one of them. "So you weren't just making out with him? Is that what you're going to tell me?" Logan sat up slowly. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed, as if I was the one who had interrupted something. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed, a long, heavy sigh that was so full of irritation it made me want to claw his eyes out. "Claire," he said, his voice calm and measured, the same tone he used when he was trying to talk me down from a ledge. "Just calm down, okay? Let's just talk about this like adults." Calm down. Like adults. The words hit me like a slap. They were treating me like I was the hysterical one, the one who was overreacting. I was the wife who had just come home to find her husband and her best friend in a compromising position, and I was being told to calm down. Mark was on his feet now, taking a tentative step towards me. His face was pale, and he was shaking. "Claire, please, just listen to me. It's not what you think.
It's been a long night. We were just messing around. It didn't mean anything. That was the moment something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, violent break. It was a clean, quiet snap, like the final thread of a rope giving way. It didn't mean anything. That was the worst part. That was the part that cut the deepest. Because if it didn't mean anything, then what did our marriage mean? What did our 5 years together mean? What did any of it mean?
You're telling me, I said slowly, enunciating every word, that you were just messing around with my best friend? That you were just playing around? Are you out of your goddamn mind? Logan stood up, brushing off his jeans. He was taller than Mark, with that lean, angular build that had always made him look like he was on the verge of starving, even though he ate like a horse. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking at me with a pitying expression that made my skin crawl. "We've been dancing around this for a long time, Claire," he said, as if he was explaining something simple to a child. "You had to have known. You had to have seen it." I had to have known? The sheer arrogance of it. The way he was trying to turn this around on me, to make me feel like I was the one who had been blind, who had been in denial. It was classic Logan. He was always the smartest person in the room, always 2 steps ahead, always able to spin any situation to his advantage. He'd used that charm to get his way his entire life, and he was using it now to justify destroying my entire world. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. I didn't even recognize it. It was a voice that was hard and cold, a voice I didn't know I had in me. "Both of you, get out of my apartment right now." Mark looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. "Claire, no, come on. Let's just talk about this. We can fix this. I love you." "Shut up," I screamed. The sound tore out of my throat, raw and ragged. I could feel the tears streaming down my face now, hot and angry, but I didn't care. "You do not get to say that to me. You do not get to stand there and tell me you love me when you just had your hands all over my best friend. You don't get to do that." Logan sighed again, that same long, weary sigh, and picked up his jacket from the back of the couch. "Fine, we'll go. But we're not done talking about this, Claire. You need to process this. You need to understand." "Understand what?" I spat. "That you're both lying, sneaking pieces of garbage? I understand that perfectly." Mark made a move towards me, his hand outstretched, and I flinched back like he was on fire. He froze, his face crumpling with hurt. He had no right to be hurt. He had no right to feel anything but shame. "Don't touch me," I whispered. "Don't you ever touch me again." They walked past me, out the door, into the dark hallway. Mark kept looking back over his shoulder, his eyes pleading, but I couldn't look at him. I just stared at the wall, at the exposed brick that had felt so romantic when we first moved in. Now it just looked cold, barren, like the inside of a prison. The door clicked shut, and I was alone. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the debris of their secret little rendezvous. The empty bottles, the tangled blankets, the smell of his cologne.
I looked at the couch, the place where Logan had been sleeping for 2 weeks, the place I had made up for him with fresh sheets and a clean pillowcase. I'd been so careful to make sure he was comfortable. I'd been so concerned about his well-being. I'd opened my home, my life, my marriage to him, and he had repaid me by destroying it. I sank to my knees in the middle of the floor, the rough texture of the carpet scraping against my bare skin. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold my body together, trying to keep the pieces from falling apart. But I couldn't. The tears came, hot and unstoppable, a tidal wave of grief and rage and confusion that washed over me and left me gasping for air. I thought about our wedding day, about the way Mark had looked at me when I walked down the aisle, his eyes shining with tears. I thought about the vows we'd made, the promises of forever. I thought about Logan, standing beside him as his best man, giving me a wink and a smile that said, "I'm so happy for you." They had both been lying to me. Maybe from the very beginning. Maybe the whole thing was a lie. The whole marriage, the whole friendship, it was all just a front for whatever secret they were hiding. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor. Hours, maybe. The blue glow of the television had long since turned into a static-filled screensaver, and the apartment had grown dark and cold. I finally forced myself to stand up, my body stiff and aching.
I walked to the bedroom, the one I shared with Mark, and I looked at the bed where I had lain next to him every night for 3 years, thinking he was mine. The bed where we had made love and talked about the future and planned our lives together. I tore the sheets off the mattress. I pulled down the pictures from the wall. I opened his closet and took out every single piece of clothing he owned, throwing them in a heap on the floor. I was a woman possessed, a hurricane of grief and fury. I wanted to erase him. I wanted to erase every trace of him from my life, from my home, from my heart. But when I finally ran out of steam, when I collapsed onto the bare mattress in a pile of exhaustion, I knew the truth. I couldn't erase him. I couldn't erase any of it. The damage was done. The trust was broken. And I had no idea what I was going to do next. I stared at the ceiling, my mind a blank white slate of shock. My life, the life I had so carefully built, had been shattered in a single moment, and I was left standing in the ruins, wondering what in the world I was supposed to do with the pieces. The silence that followed their departure was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a deafening, oppressive void that pressed in on me from all sides. Every tick of the clock on the wall sounded like a hammer strike. Every creak of the old building settling sounded like footsteps in the hallway. I lay on the bare mattress for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of Logan's lips on Mark's neck over and over again until it was burned into my retinas. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke up to the pale gray light of dawn filtering through the blinds. For a blissful, stupid second, I forgot everything. I reached across the bed, expecting to feel Mark's warm body next to mine, and when my hand met nothing but cold, empty sheets, it all came crashing back. The memory hit me like a physical blow, and I sat up so fast my head spun. My phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it, my fingers trembling, and saw a flood of notifications. 17 text messages from Mark, 6 missed calls, 3 texts from Logan. I didn't open any of them. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to read their excuses, their justifications, their desperate attempts to rewrite the narrative of what I had seen with my own 2 eyes. I scrolled past them and called my sister, Sarah. She was the only person I could think of. She was 3 years older than me, a divorce attorney who had seen every shade of human depravity in her line of work. She was pragmatic to a fault, cynical, and had never really liked Mark. She'd always said he was too quiet, too closed off. I'd always dismissed her concerns as her projecting her own failed marriage onto mine. Now I realized she had probably seen something I was too blinded by love to notice. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. "Claire? It's 6 a.m. What's wrong?" I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out except a strangled sob. The tears started again, hot and relentless, and I couldn't stop them. "Claire? Claire, talk to me. What happened? Is Mark okay? Are you okay?" "I need you to come over," I managed to choke out. "Please, Sarah, I need you to come over right now." "I'm on my way," she said immediately, and I heard the rustling of sheets and the sound of her getting out of bed. "Don't move, don't do anything. Just stay where you are. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up, and I was left alone with the silence again. I looked around the bedroom at the chaos I had created the night before. Clothes everywhere, drawers pulled open, the mattress stripped bare. It looked like a crime scene. In a way, it was. The crime was the murder of my marriage, and I was the only witness. I forced myself to get up and walk to the bathroom. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. My eyes were red and swollen, my face blotchy, my hair a tangled mess. I looked like I had been through a war. I guess I had. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to compose myself, but it was useless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Logan's hands in Mark's hair. I saw Mark's expression of pure, unguarded contentment.
I saw the way they had looked at each other, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this wasn't a one-time thing. This had been building for a long time. Sarah arrived in record time. She didn't even knock. She just used the spare key I'd given her and let herself in. I heard her footsteps in the living room, followed by a sharp intake of breath. She must have seen the mess. The empty bottles, the tangled blankets, the remnants of their betrayal. "Claire?" she called out, her voice tight with concern. "Where are you?" "In here," I said, my voice hollow. She appeared in the bathroom doorway, her eyes scanning the room, taking in my appearance, the chaos behind me. She was still in her pajamas, a pair of flannel pants and an old t-shirt, and her hair was thrown up in a messy bun. She looked at me for a long moment, her face unreadable, and then she crossed the room and pulled me into a tight hug. I broke down completely. All the anger, all the rage, all the confusion, it all dissolved into a puddle of grief in my sister's arms. I sobbed into her shoulder, my whole body shaking, and she just held me, rubbing my back and murmuring soothing words. "It's okay," she said. "I've got you. I've got you. Just let it out." When I finally pulled back, my face was a mess of tears and snot. Sarah didn't flinch. She just handed me a tissue and waited. "Tell me what happened," she said gently, "from the beginning." I told her everything.
I told her about coming home late, about the grocery bags, about the dark hallway. I told her about seeing them on the floor, about the way Logan was touching him, about the kiss on the neck. I told her about Mark's pathetic excuse, about Logan's arrogant dismissal. By the time I was done, I was shaking again. Sarah's face was a mask of controlled fury. She didn't say anything for a long moment. She just stood there, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. "I'm going to kill him," she said finally, her voice flat and cold. "I'm going to find that worthless piece of garbage, and I'm going to kill him." "Which one?" I asked, letting out a hollow laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Both of them," she said, slowly, painfully. She pulled me back into the living room, navigating around the debris on the floor. She sat me down on the couch, the same couch Logan had been sleeping on, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. I watched her move around the space, her movements sharp and efficient. She was in lawyer mode now, her mind already working on solutions, while I was still drowning in the shock of it all. "Okay," she said, coming back with 2 steaming mugs. "Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to drink this. Then you're going to take a shower and get dressed. And then we're going to figure out your next steps." I took the coffee, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "What next steps? My husband just cheated on me with my best friend. What is there to figure out?" "It's over." Sarah sat down next to me, her expression softening. "I know it feels that way right now, but you need to be smart about this. You need to protect yourself. You can't just make a decision based on emotion. What are you talking about?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a serious, confidential tone. "I'm talking about the apartment. I'm talking about your joint bank account. I'm talking about the car that's in both of your names. You need to get your ducks in a row before you make any moves. You need to see a lawyer." "I can't think about that right now," I said, shaking my head. "I can't think about anything. My brain feels like it's full of static." "I know," she said. "I know it's overwhelming, but you need to trust me on this. Men like Mark,
সাগরের ঢেউ দেখিয়া নাই মন সাগরে, নানা মিলে সাধন ভজন সকলি যাই বিফলে গো, সকলি যাই বিফলে। ওরে রূপ সাগরের ঢেউ দেখিয়া নাই মন সাগরে, নানা মিলে সাধন ভজন সকলি যাই বিফলে গো, সকলি যাই বিফলে। আহা সাগরের দুই মোহনা এক একটি আশায় একটি যাওয়া, সাধক যারা নাই মোতারা, সাধক যাহারা নাই মোতারা, সাধক যারা নাই মোতারা, সাধক সারা যায় ডুবে। রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে মনে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে। সাগরের খাইছ ননি আসিয়া এই ববেতে, আরেক সাগরটাকে তোমায় নিতে তার মোহনাতে গো, নিতে তার মোহনাতে। ও এক সাগরের খাইছ ননি আসিয়া এই ববেতে, আরেক সাগরটাকে তোমায় নিতে তার মোহনাতে গো, নিতে তার মোহনাতে। ওরে মোহনাতে জুয়ার বাটা, মোহনাতে জুয়ার বাটা, না জানিয়া যাব দিলে মন মরবি অকালে। রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে মনে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে। সাগরের সাধক যারা তারা নাইমা সাগরে, আরে এক চুমুকে শুকাই পানি ডুবার বয়তার না থাকে গো, ডুবার বয়তার না থাকে। ওরে রূপসাগরের সাধক যারা তারা নাইমা সাগরে, এক চুমুকে শুকাই পানি ডুবার বয়তার না থাকে গো, ডুবার বয়তার না থাকে। ওরে জয় বেবে কয় সাধক সারা, জয় বেবে কয় সাধক সারা, জয় বেবে কয় সাধক সারা, জুয়ার আসলে যাই ডুবে। রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে মনে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে।
All the right promises, and you need to be strong enough to see through it. I looked down at my coffee, the steam curling up into my face. He texted me 17 times. I haven't opened any of them. Good, Sarah said. Don't. Not yet. Let him sweat. Let him wonder what you're thinking. Right now, you hold all the cards. Don't give that up. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I agreed. I didn't feel like I held any cards. I felt like I was the one who had been played. The day that followed was a blur of numbness and practicalities.
Sarah stayed with me, answering my phone, fielding calls from Mark's family and mutual friends who had heard rumors and were checking in. She was a fortress, a shield between me and the outside world. She made me eat, made me drink water, made me get out of the apartment for a walk around the block. I finally broke down and opened Mark's texts while Sarah was in the bathroom. They were a symphony of desperation. Claire, please call me. I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please just let me explain. I love you. I've never stopped loving you. This doesn't change that. Logan and I, it was a mistake. It was a one-time thing. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. I'm staying at a hotel downtown. I'll wait as long as it takes for you to be ready to talk. They were pathetic. They were textbook. Every single one of them was the kind of excuse you'd hear in a bad movie. I felt nothing reading them. Not anger, not sadness, just a cold, hollow emptiness. Logan's texts were even worse. Claire, I know you're angry, but you need to hear me out. This isn't about you. This is about something Mark and I have been dealing with for a long time. We never meant to hurt you. You have to believe that.
Please, don't make this into something it's not. We love you. We both love you. The arrogance, the sheer, breathtaking arrogance. He was trying to gaslight me, to make me feel like I was the irrational one for being upset that my husband had his tongue down my best friend's throat. It was almost impressive. I didn't respond to either of them. I just blocked both their numbers and handed the phone back to Sarah. I need to get out of here, I said. I can't stay in this apartment. Everywhere I look, I see them. I see it happening. Sarah nodded. Okay, you can stay with me for as long as you need. But first, I'm taking you to see a friend of mine. A friend? A lawyer, she said. She specializes in high-conflict divorces. She's good, really good, and she's discreet. The word divorce hung in the air between us, heavy and final. It was the first time anyone had said it out loud, and it made everything feel so much more real. I wasn't just a wife whose husband had cheated on her. I was a woman on the verge of ending her marriage. I'm not ready to make that decision, I said, my voice small. I know, Sarah said. I'm not asking you to. I'm eyeing you to be prepared. There's a difference. I agreed, more out of exhaustion than conviction. I let her drive me to a sleek office building downtown, to a law firm that smelled like expensive coffee and ambition. The lawyer, a woman named Andrea, with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper gaze, listened to my story without interrupting. She took notes, asked a few clarifying questions, and then laid out my options with a cold, clinical efficiency that was both comforting and terrifying. You have a few paths forward, she said, leaning back in her chair. The first is reconciliation, couples counseling, therapy, the whole 9 yards. It's the most emotionally taxing option, and statistically, the least successful in cases involving infidelity with a close friend. I winced. The second is separation. You live apart, you figure out the financials, you take time to decide what you want. It's a middle ground. It gives you breathing room, but it also leaves you in a state of limbo. And the third? The third is divorce, full dissolution of the marriage, asset division, spousal support, the whole process. It's the most difficult in the short term, but it's the cleanest break in the long term. I don't know what I want, I admitted. I just know I can't go back to the way things were. Andrea nodded, her expression sympathetic but professional. That's completely normal. You don't have to decide anything today. But you do need to make some practical moves. You need to secure your financial accounts. You need to document everything. And you need to find somewhere else to live. I told her I was going to stay with my sister. She approved. She handed me a folder filled with forms and checklists, a roadmap for the destruction of my life, and I walked out of her office feeling like I was carrying a bomb in my hands. That night, in Sarah's guest room, surrounded by boxes of my things that she had helped me pack, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the loss. I had lost my husband, my best friend, my home, and my sense of self, all in the span of a single night. I didn't know who I was anymore. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and I let myself think about all the little moments I had missed. The way Mark would sometimes get distant, lost in thought. The way Logan would look at him a little too long. The way they gravitated towards each other in a room full of people. I had interpreted it as friendship, as bonding. Now I saw it for what it was. It was a secret, a shared world that I was never a part of. And that was the part that hurt the most, maybe. Not the sex, not the physical act of betrayal. It was the intimacy. It was the idea that there was a part of Mark that I had never known, a part of him that belonged to someone else. Logan knew him in a way I never had. He understood him in a way I never could. And that knowledge was a poison that seeped into every memory, every happy moment, every promise we had ever made. I picked up my phone, the screen glowing in the darkness.
I scrolled through my photos, past all the pictures of Mark and me, our trip to the Grand Canyon, our lazy Sundays on the couch, our anniversary dinner at that fancy restaurant he'd saved up for months to afford. And every single one, I looked so happy. I looked so in love. And in every single one, there was a version of Mark I didn't know existed. The tears came again, but this time they were different. They weren't tears of shock or anger. They were tears of resignation. I was mourning the loss of a marriage that had never been what I thought it was. I was mourning the death of a fairy tale. I finally fell asleep in the early hours of the morning, my phone clutched in my hand, my cheeks still wet. I dreamt of falling, a long, endless fall through a dark void with no bottom in sight. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the window. I could hear Sarah moving around in the kitchen, the smell of bacon and coffee drifting down the hallway. For a moment, I was disoriented. I didn't recognize the room. Then the memories came flooding back, and I felt the familiar weight of grief settle back onto my chest. I dragged myself out of bed and walked to the kitchen. Sarah was at the stove, flipping pancakes. She looked up when I walked in, her face softening with concern. "Hey," she said, "you look like hell." "Thanks," I said, my voice raspy. "I feel like it." I sat down at the table, and she pushed a plate of food in front of me. I picked at it without any appetite, the smell of bacon making my stomach turn. "I've been thinking," I said finally, breaking the silence. "About what?" I took a deep breath. About what Andrea said. About documenting everything. About being prepared. Sarah put down her spatula and gave me her full attention. "Okay, what are you thinking?" I thought about Mark. I thought about the way he had looked at me with those desperate, pleading eyes. I thought about Logan, standing there with his arms crossed, acting like I was the unreasonable one. I thought about all the years I had given them, all the love I had poured into our relationships, all the trust I had placed in them. And then I thought about the look on Logan's face when I walked in. The annoyance. The irritation. As if I was the one who had ruined something beautiful. That was the moment the last thread of my sympathy snapped. "I'm thinking," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days, "that I need to stop being a victim. I need to start being a survivor. And that starts with getting my house in order, both literally and metaphorically." Sarah's face broke into a small, proud smile. "That's my sister." "I want to go back to the apartment," I said. "I want to get the rest of my things, and I want to change the locks." "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Sarah asked. "No," I admitted, "but I don't think I'll ever be ready. I just have to do it."
We finished breakfast in silence, and then I got dressed in the most practical clothes I had, jeans and a sweater, and we drove back to the apartment. The drive was a blur of familiar streets, but they all looked different now, like I was seeing them through a stranger's eyes. We pulled up to the building, and I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. The walk-up seemed taller than I remembered, more forbidding. The hallway was the same dark, narrow corridor, but now it felt like a tunnel leading to a nightmare. I unlocked the door, my hands shaking, and pushed it open. The apartment was exactly as I had left it, except cleaner. Mark had been here. He had cleaned up the mess. The coffee table was spotless. The blankets were folded and stacked on the arm of the couch. The empty bottles were gone. But there was something new. An envelope on the kitchen counter, with my name written in Mark's handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart pounding. Sarah was beside me, her hand on my arm. "You don't have to read it," she said. "Yes, I do," I said. "I need to know what he has to say." I picked up the envelope and tore it open. There was a letter inside, 3 pages long, written in Mark's neat, precise handwriting. I started reading, my eyes scanning the words. "My dearest Claire," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you came back, and it means I'm not here. I know you don't want to see me, and I respect that. I'm not writing this to beg for your forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing this to tell you the truth, the whole truth, about me, about Logan, about everything." I stopped reading. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold the paper. "What does it say?" Sarah asked. "Give me a minute," I said. "I need to process this." I took a deep breath and continued reading. "I've known I was different since I was a teenager. I knew I wasn't like other guys. I tried to ignore it. I tried to pray it away. I tried to date girls, to force myself to feel things I didn't feel. And then I met you, and I fell in love with you. Not the way you wanted me to, but I loved you. You were my best friend. You were my partner. You were everything I thought I needed to be happy. When Logan came back into your life, I knew immediately that there was something there. There was a connection I couldn't explain. I tried to fight it. I tried to push it away, but it was too strong. It was like gravity. We were drawn to each other. And I hate myself for it. I hate myself for hurting you. I hate myself for being too much of a coward to tell you the truth from the beginning. I couldn't read anymore. I folded the letter and shoved it back in the envelope, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "What does he say?" Sarah asked again, her voice gentle. "He says he loves me," I said, my voice hollow. "He says he loves me, but he's in love with Logan." "He's been in love with Logan this whole time. I was just a cover, a front, a beard." Sarah pulled me into a hug, and I let myself cry, right there in the middle of my destroyed apartment. I cried for my marriage, for my friendship, for all the years I had wasted, loving people who couldn't love me back the way I needed them to. When I finally pulled back, I felt a strange sense of clarity. It was the kind of clarity that comes after the worst of the pain has passed, the kind that lets you see things for what they really are. "Change the locks," I said, my voice firm, "and call the movers. I want my name off this lease, I want my life back, and I want it to be my life, not his, not theirs, mine." The weeks that followed were a strange, suspended purgatory. I moved through the days like a ghost, present but not really there, going through the motions of a life I no longer recognized. Sarah's guest room became my cocoon, a safe space where I could curl up and disappear from the world. I stopped answering calls from mutual friends. I deleted my social media accounts. I didn't want to see the pity in people's eyes, or worse, the morbid curiosity. I could already imagine the whispers. "Did you hear about Claire? Her husband left her for her best friend. Can you imagine?" Yes, I could imagine. I was living it. The first week was the hardest. I spent most of it in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every moment, every touch. I analyzed our marriage like a detective examining a crime scene, looking for clues I had missed. The late nights at work that had seemed so innocent, the sudden truts to visit his parents that he'd taken alone, the way he'd flinched when I touched him sometimes, a micro-expression of discomfort he'd always explained away as being tired. I found a therapist, a woman named Dr. Evans, who specialized in infidelity and trauma. She had a calm, soothing voice and an office filled with plants and soft lighting. She listened to my story without judgment, and she gave me permission to feel all of the messy, conflicting emotions that were swirling around inside me. Betrayal is a unique kind of pain, she told me during our second session. It's not just the loss of a relationship. It's the loss of trust in your own judgment. You're going to question everything, every choice you made, every sign you missed. And that's normal. But it's important to remember that you didn't cause this. This was not your fault. I knew she was right, intellectually, but emotionally, I couldn't help but wonder, what if I had been more attentive? What if I had seen the signs? What if I had been a better wife, a better friend? Would they have still done what they did? The questions were relentless, a never-ending loop of self-doubt that kept me up at night and drained my energy during the day. It was Sarah who finally pulled me out of my spiral. She came into my room one Saturday morning, threw open the curtains, and announced that I was getting out of the apartment if it killed her. "You're going to come with me to the farmer's market," she said, her tone brooking no argument. "You're going to eat a pastry, you're going to look at some overpriced vegetables, and you're not going to think about Mark or Logan for at least 1 hour." "I don't think I can do that," I said, pulling the covers over my head. "You can and you will," she said, yanking them off. "This is non-negotiable. You've been hiding in this room for 3 weeks. It's time to rejoin the land of the living." I protested, but she was relentless. She dragged me out of bed, shoved me into the shower, and picked out an outfit for me. She even put on some music, some upbeat pop song I'd never heard before, and danced around the room like an idiot until I cracked a smile. That was the first real smile I'd had in weeks. It felt strange on my face, like I was wearing someone else's expression. The farmer's market was chaos. a riot of colors and smells and noise. People were everywhere. Families with strollers, couples holding hands, dogs on leashes. I felt like an alien, dropped into a world I no longer belonged to. Every happy couple I saw felt like a personal affront. Every laughing child was a reminder of the future I thought I was building. But Sarah was a force of nature. She dragged me from stall to stall, making me sample jams and cheeses and breads. She bought me a lavender lemonade and a croissant that was so buttery and flaky it practically melted in my mouth. And for a few moments, just a few moments, I forgot about the nightmare that had become my life. I was standing in front of a stall selling handmade candles, breathing in the scent of vanilla and sandalwood, when my phone buzzed. I'd been ignoring it for weeks, but Sarah had made me bring it in case of emergencies. I pulled it out of my pocket and glanced at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. "Claire, it's Logan. I know you've blocked me. I know you don't want to talk to me. But I need you to know that Mark is hurting. He's falling apart. He needs you. We need you. Please, just hear me out." The words hit me like a slap. The sheer audacity, the entitlement. He was trying to make me feel guilty. He was trying to make me responsible for their happiness. My hand started to shake, and the lavender lemonade sloshed over the rim of the cup. Sarah noticed immediately. "What is it? What's wrong?" I handed her the phone without a word. She read the message, and her face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Son of a bitch," she muttered. "He's got some nerve." I felt the anger rising in me again, hot and uncontrollable. But this time it was different. It wasn't the helpless anger of a victim. It was the righteous anger of someone who had finally had enough. "Give me the phone," I said. Sarah hesitated. "Claire, don't engage with him." "That's exactly what he wants." "Give me the phone," I repeated, my voice firm. She handed it over, her eyes wary. I stared at Logan's message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I thought about what to say. I thought about all the things I wanted to scream at him. But in the end, I kept it simple. "I don't need you," I typed. "I don't need either of you. Leave me alone." I hit send, blocked the number, and handed the phone back to Sarah. My heart was pounding, but I felt a strange sense of relief. It was like I'd finally found my voice after weeks of silence. "That was brave," Sarah said quietly. "It wasn't brave," I said. "It was necessary." We went back to her apartment, and I spent the rest of the day in a strange, detached state. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just numb. I knew the emotions were there, lurking beneath the surface, but I couldn't access them. It was like my brain had put up a wall to protect me from the full weight of what was happening. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I started thinking about all the practical things I'd been avoiding. The lease, the bank accounts, the car, the life I had shared with Mark that was now a tangled web of legal and financial entanglements. I got out of bed and went to the living room, where I found Sarah still awake, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and a legal thriller. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "No," I said. "I've been thinking." "About what?"
"About the apartment," I said. "The lease is in both our names. I can't just walk away. I need to formally break it. And there's the joint account, the car, our taxes. There's so much to untangle." Sarah set down her book and patted the couch next to her. "That's the hardest part," she said. "The logistics, the stuff that makes it real. But it's also the part that gives you power. When you start making decisions about your assets, you're taking control back." "I know," I said. "I just don't know where to start." "We'll make a list," she said. "Tomorrow. We'll figure out what needs to be done, and we'll do it one step at a time." I nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. Sarah was so good at this, so practical and organized. She was the yin to my yang, the calm to my chaos. I didn't know what I would have done without her. The next morning, we sat down at her kitchen table with a stack of paper and a pot of coffee. We started with the lease. I called the landlord and explained the situation, my voice steady and professional. I told him I needed to be removed from the lease, and he agreed, albeit reluctantly. It would cost me a fee, but it was worth it. Then we moved on to the bank accounts. I went to the bank and closed the joint account, transferring half of the balance into a new account in my name alone. The teller gave me a sympathetic look, but I didn't acknowledge it. I just signed the papers and walked out, feeling a strange sense of liberation.
The car was trickier.
It was in both of our names, but Mark had been the primary driver. I decided to let him have it. I didn't want the reminder. I didn't want anything that tied me to him. By the end of the week, I had untangled most of my financial life from Mark's. It was a slow, painful process, but it was also empowering. Every signature I signed, every form I submitted, was a step towards reclaiming my autonomy. But the hardest part was yet to come, the emotional part. The part where I had to confront the fact that my marriage was truly over. It was a Thursday evening when I finally decided to go through the boxes of my things that Sarah had helped me pack. They were stacked in the corner of her living room, a monument to my former life. I opened the first box and started pulling out items, one by one. A sweater Mark had given me for my birthday, a photo album from our honeymoon in Hawaii, a card he had written me on our first anniversary, the words still making my heart ache. I love you more than I ever thought possible. You are my world, my everything. Forever yours, Mark. I read the words and I felt a strange, hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't pain exactly. It was more like a phantom limb, the memory of a love that had been amputated. I put the card aside and kept digging. At the bottom of the box, I found a small, leather-bound journal. I didn't recognize it at first. Then I opened it and I realized it was Mark's.
It must have gotten mixed in with my things when Sarah was packing. I knew I shouldn't read it. I knew it was a violation of privacy, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to understand. I needed to know what was going on inside his head. I sat down on the floor and started reading. The journal was a chronicle of our marriage, but from Mark's perspective, and the entries were heartbreaking. September 12th. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. Claire is wonderful. She's everything I ever wanted, but I feel like I'm living a lie. Every day I pretend to be someone I'm not. I try to be the husband she deserves, but I can't escape who I really am. November 3rd. Logan came over for dinner tonight. I couldn't stop staring at him. Claire noticed, but she thought I was just being friendly. She has no idea. No one has any idea. I feel so alone. January 15th. Logan kissed me tonight. It was just a brief kiss, but it was everything. I've never felt anything like it. I've been carrying the secret for so long, and finally someone knows, someone understands. I feel like I'm coming alive for the first time. March 22nd. We can't keep this up. We're going to get caught. But I can't stop. Every time I see him, every time I touch him, I feel like I'm finally being honest. But it's destroying Claire. I can see it in her eyes. She knows something is wrong, and I'm too much of a coward to tell her the truth. The entries went on and on. Some of them were mundane, talking about work or the weather, but the recurring theme was the same: guilt, shame, desire. He was trapped in a prison of his own making, and I was the unwitting guard. I read until my eyes burned with tears. I read until my heart felt like it had been shattered into a million pieces. And when I was done, I closed the journal and hugged it to my chest. He had been suffering. All those years he had been suffering, and I had never known. I had been so focused on my own happiness, my own vision of our future, that I had missed the signs that he was drowning. I didn't know what to do with this new information. It didn't make me forgive him. It didn't make what he had done any less painful, but it humanized him. It made him a flawed, broken person, not just a villain. I didn't tell Sarah about the journal. I didn't tell anyone. I just put it back in the box and closed the lid. It was my secret now, a burden I would have to carry alone. A few days later, I got a call from Andrea, the lawyer. She had some news. "Claire," she said, her voice neutral, "I've been in contact with Mark's lawyer. He's made an initial offer for the division of assets. It's fairly generous. He's offering to give you a larger share of the savings and the equity in the apartment." I was silent for a moment. "Why would he do that? He doesn't have to." "He says it's because he wants to make this as painless as possible for you," Andrea said. "He feels guilty. He wants to make amends." I thought about the journal.
আমার সরল দিলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ, সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ আমার সরল দিলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। আমার খাইলি আমার পড়লি তবু দিলি জ্বালা, কি যে খেলাম শুনতে খারাপ দিয়া তোরে মালা। ও আমার খাইলি আমার পড়লি তবু দিলি জ্বালা, কি যে খাইলাম শুনতে খারাপ দিয়া তোরে মালা। সাদা দিলে লাগলো কাদা, সাদা দিলে লাগলো কাদা, কান্দিরে আড়ালে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন জমিদার মিলে। জানি তো হবে এমন, জানতাম যদি আগে, তবে কি আর প্রাণ থাকিতে তোরে মায়া লাগে। ও কে জানি তো হবে এমন, জানতাম যদি আগে, তবে কি আর প্রাণ থাকিতে তোরে মায়া লাগে। কয় মল্লিকে বাঁচি এখন, কয় মল্লিকে বাঁচি এখন, আপদ বিদায় হলে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন জমিদার মিলে। ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। ও তুই সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ, সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ আমার সরল দিলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ, সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ আমার সরল দিলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে।
Married for so long. Maybe this was his way of trying to make things right. Or maybe it was just another way to assuage his own conscience. Take the deal, I said finally. I don't want to drag this out. Are you sure? Andrea asked. You could probably get more if you fought for it. I don't care about the money, I said. I just want it to be over. Andrea agreed, and the papers were drawn up. A few days later, I received a thick envelope in the mail. It was the final dissolution of my marriage. I signed the documents with a steady hand, and I sent them back. And just like that, it was done. I was no longer Claire Sullivan. I was Claire Brennan again, my maiden name. A fresh start. But the finality of it didn't hit me until I was standing in the middle of Sarah's living room, holding the signed copy of the divorce decree in my hands. It felt so official, so irrevocable. It was a piece of paper that said my marriage was over. But it couldn't capture the years of love, the shared dreams, the countless moments of joy and sorrow. It was just a document, cold and impersonal. I sat down on the couch, the paper in my lap, and I let myself cry. I cried for the loss of my marriage, for the friendship I had lost, for the future I had to let go of. I cried for Mark, who had been so lost and confused for so long.
And I cried for myself, for the woman I used to be before all of this. When the tears finally stopped, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. It was a fragile thing, a flicker of light in the darkness, but it was there. I had survived. I had made it through the worst of it. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was going to be okay. I was 31 years old. I had a job I loved, a sister who would do anything for me, and a future that was wide open. I didn't know what was next, and for the first time, I was okay with that. I was ready to find out. But then, just as I was starting to feel like I had a grip on things, the universe decided to throw me another curveball. It came in the form of a text from an unknown number, just a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. "Claire, it's my mom. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me." I stared at the message, my heart sinking. Mark's mother, Barbara, had always been kind to me. We had been close, closer than I was with my own mother. She had been devastated when she found out about the divorce, and I hadn't had the heart to talk to her since. I didn't know what she wanted, but I knew I couldn't ignore her. She had been a part of my life for so long, and despite everything, I still cared about her. I took a deep breath and called her. "Claire?" Her voice was hesitant, fragile. "Thank you for calling." "Barbara?" I said. "What's wrong?" There was a pause, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "It's Mark," she said. "He's in the hospital. He tried to take his own life." The world stopped. The words hung in the air, unreal, impossible. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. My mind was a blank white void of shock. "Claire, are you still there?" "I'm here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What happened? Is he okay?" "He's stable," she said. "He's alive, but he's in a bad way. He's been in a depression for months, ever since the divorce. He couldn't handle the guilt. He couldn't handle losing you." I closed my eyes, and I saw Mark's face. I saw the desperation in his eyes that night. I saw the letter he had written me, the confession of a man who had been living a lie for his entire adult life. I saw the journal entries, the pain and the shame that had driven him to this. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. I was angry at him for what he had done to me, but I was also horrified that he had tried to end his life. He was a man who had made terrible mistakes, but he didn't deserve to die. "Can you come see him?" Barbara asked. "He's asking for you. He won't say it, but I know he is." I thought about seeing Mark again. I thought about the last time I saw him, his face pale and panicked, his eyes pleading. I thought about all the pain he had caused me. And I thought about the man I had once loved, the man who had been my partner and my best friend.
"I'll come," I said. "I'll be there tomorrow." The drive to the hospital was a blur. I don't remember getting in the car or navigating the familiar streets of the city that had once been my home. I just remembered the cold grip of the steering wheel in my hands, the hum of the engine, and the endless loop of questions spinning through my mind. What was I doing?
Why was I going to see him? After everything he had done, after the divorce, after the months of silence, why was I walking back into the fire? Sarah had tried to talk me out of it. She'd stood in the doorway of her apartment, her arms crossed, her face a mask of concern and frustration. "This is a mistake," she'd said. "You're not responsible for him anymore. He made his choices. He has to live with them." "I know," I'd said, "but his mother called. She's desperate. And he's in the hospital. I can't just pretend I don't care." "You don't owe him anything," Sarah had insisted. "He destroyed your marriage. He destroyed your friendship with Logan. He lied to you for years. You have every right to walk away and never look back." "I'm not doing it for him," I'd said, and I'd meant it. "I'm doing it for me. I need to see him. I need to close this chapter. If I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if. What if I had gone? What if I had said something? I can't live with that." Sarah had sighed, the kind of sigh that said she knew she wasn't going to win this argument. "Fine, but I'm coming with you." "I'll wait in the car, and if you need to leave, you text me, and I'll come get you. No questions asked." I'd agreed, and now she was following me in her own car, a silent guardian angel watching my back. I was grateful for her presence, even if I didn't say it out loud. I was grateful for a lot of things these days. Grateful for her unwavering support. Grateful for the therapist who had helped me piece my sanity back together. Grateful for the small, quiet moments of peace that were becoming more frequent. The hospital was a sprawling complex of white buildings and glass walkways, the kind of place that smelled like antiseptic and desperation. I parked in the visitor's lot and sat in the car for a long moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a frantic, erratic rhythm that matched the chaos in my mind. I thought about the last time I'd seen Mark, the night I'd walked in on him and Logan, the way he'd looked at me with those desperate, pleading eyes, the way he'd tried to explain, to apologize, to make me understand. And I thought about the letter he'd written me, the confession that had laid bare all of his secrets. He had been so broken. He had been broken for so long, and I had been too blind to see it. I'd been so wrapped up in my own vision of our perfect life that I'd missed the signs that he was drowning. I'd missed the way he flinched when I touched him. I'd missed the distance in his eyes, the way he'd drift away from me, even when he was right next to me. I'd missed the sadness that had settled into his bones, a quiet, unspoken grief that he'd carried with him every single day. Maybe that was why I was here. Not to forgive him, not to save him, but to understand. To finally, truly understand. I got out of the car and walked into the hospital. The lobby was bright and sterile, filled with the low hum of conversation and the beeping of machines. I approached the front desk and gave Mark's name. The receptionist typed something into her computer and told me he was on the 3rd floor, room 312. I took the elevator up, my stomach churning with a mix of anxiety and dread. The doors opened onto a quiet hallway, the floors polished to a high shine, the walls painted a soothing shade of pale blue. I walked past a nurse's station, past rooms with their doors open, revealing glimpses of patients and their families. Room 312 was at the end of the hall. The door was closed, and there was a small plaque next to it with Mark's name on it. I stood outside for a long moment, my hand hovering over the handle, my heart racing. I could hear voices inside, a woman's voice, soft and reassuring, Barbara, and a man's voice, low and tired, Mark. I took a deep breath and knocked. The voices stopped. There was a pause, and the door opened. Barbara stood there, her face lined with exhaustion and worry. She looked older than I remembered, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair disheveled. She looked at me, and her face crumpled with relief. "Claire," she whispered. "Oh, Claire, thank you. Thank you for coming." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She stepped aside and gestured for me to enter. The room was small and dimly lit, the curtains drawn against the harsh afternoon sun. There was a bed in the center, and Mark was lying in it, propped up against a pile of pillows. He was pale, gaunt, his face hollow and shadowed. He had lost weight, a lot of weight, and his cheekbones were sharp, almost skeletal. There were bandages on his wrists, white and stark against his skin. He looked up when I walked in, and his eyes widened. He looked like a child, scared and vulnerable, stripped of all the defenses he'd built up over the years. "Claire," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You came." I stood at the foot of the bed, my hands clasped in front of me. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know if I should sit down or stand or run. I felt like a stranger in my own life. "I'm here," I said. "Your mother called." He nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to see me like this. I'm sorry for everything." Barbara quietly slipped out of the room, giving us privacy. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was alone with Mark for the first time since the night everything fell apart.
"I read your journal," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "The one that got mixed in with my things. I read it all." Mark's face went white. He looked away, his jaw tight. "You weren't supposed to see that." "I know," I said, "but I did, and I think it helped me understand. Not forgive, but understand." He closed his eyes, and I saw a tear slip down his cheek. "I was so lost," he said, "for so long. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted, and I was so scared. Scared of hurting you, scared of losing you, scared of being alone." "But you hurt me anyway," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You hurt me in the worst way possible. You lied to me. You made me feel like I was crazy for sensing something was wrong. You made me question my own sanity." "I know," he said. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I hate myself for everything I did to you. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I destroyed it. I destroyed us." I sat down in the chair next to his bed, my legs suddenly weak. I looked at him, this man I had loved so deeply, and I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, pity, and underneath it all, a flicker of something that might have been compassion. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth, from the beginning?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he took a shaky breath and began to speak. "I was a coward," he said. "I was so scared of admitting who I really was. I grew up in a family that didn't talk about things like that. My dad was a traditional guy, a macho guy. He used to make jokes about gay people, cruel jokes. And I knew, even as a kid, that I was different. But I buried it. I buried it so deep, I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. I listened, my heart aching. I knew his father. I knew the kind of man he was, and I could imagine the pressure, the fear, the constant need to perform a version of masculinity that wasn't his own. Then I met you," he continued, "and you were so wonderful, so kind and smart and beautiful. I thought if I could just love you enough, I could fix myself. I could become the man I was supposed to be. And for a while, I believed it. I really did." "But you couldn't," I said. "You couldn't fix it." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I couldn't." And then Logan came back into our lives, and I felt something I'd never felt before. A connection, a pull. I tried to fight it. I tried to push him away, but it was like gravity. I couldn't escape it. I thought about Logan, about the friendship we'd shared, the decades of trust and loyalty. I thought about the way he'd looked at me that night, his eyes cold and dismissive. He hadn't been sorry. He'd been annoyed. He treated me like I was the one who had done something wrong. "I don't understand," I said. "How could you do this to me? How could you both do this to me? I loved you. I trusted you. You were my whole world." Mark reached out, his hand trembling, and I let him take mine. His fingers were cold and thin, and I could feel the bones beneath his skin. "I know," he said, "and I will never, ever be able to make it right. I know that. But I want you to know that I did love you. I still love you. Not the way you deserved, not the way you needed, but I loved you. You were my best friend. You were my partner. You were everything I thought I wanted. And losing you was like losing a part of myself." I pulled my hand away, Not out of anger, but out of a need for distance. I needed to think. I needed to process. "Where is Logan?" I asked. "Is he coming to see you?" Mark's face went pale. He looked away, his jaw tight. "He's not coming. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle the guilt. He told me it was too much for him. He left. He's gone." I felt a surge of anger so sharp it made my vision blur. Logan had abandoned him. After everything, after all the secrets and lies, after destroying my marriage and my friendship, he had just walked away. It was so typically Logan, so selfish, so cowardly. "He's a piece of work," I said, my voice cold. "He used you. He used you and then he left you to deal with the consequences alone." "I know," Mark said. "I know. And I deserve it. I deserve everything that's happened to me." I looked at him, lying there in that hospital bed, broken and defeated. I thought about all the years we had spent together, all the laughter and the tears, all the dreams we had shared. And I realized in that moment that I couldn't hate him. I wanted to. I wanted to hate him with every fiber of my being, but I couldn't. He was too broken, too sad, too human. "I'm not going to lie to you," I said. "I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. And part of me will probably always be angry and hurt. But I don't want you to die. I don't want you to suffer. You made terrible choices, but you're not a terrible person. You're just a person who made terrible mistakes." Mark's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your kindness." "It's not kindness," I said. I don't know what it is. Closure, maybe? I need to let go of the anger. I need to let go of you. And the only way to do that is to forgive you. Not for you, for me." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything hanging between us. Then I stood up, my legs feeling steadier than they had in months. "I'm going to go," I said. "I came to see you, to make sure you were okay. But I can't stay. I can't be part of your life anymore." "I know," he said. "I know. But Claire, before you go, I want you to know something. I want you to know that you're the strongest person I've ever met. You survived this. You survived us. And you're going to be okay. You're going to be more than okay. You're going to thrive." I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." I walked to the door and paused, my hand on the handle. I looked back at him one last time. He was crying, silent tears streaming down his face. But there was something different in his eyes, a spark of hope, a glimmer of life. "Take care of yourself, Mark," I said. "Get help, real help, and don't give up. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be who you really are." He nodded, unable to speak, and then I walked out the door. Barbara was waiting in the hallway, her eyes anxious. She looked at me, and I could see the question in her eyes. "He's going to be okay," I said. "He's going to be okay. He just needs time." She nodded, and I saw the tension in her shoulders ease. "Thank you, Claire. Thank you for coming. I know it wasn't easy." "It wasn't," I said, "but I'm glad I did, for both of us." I walked back to the elevator, my steps slow and measured. My heart was heavy, but there was also a lightness to it, a sense of release. I had done what I came to do. I had faced the ghost of my past, and I had let it go. When I got back to the car, Sarah was waiting. She looked at me, her eyes searching my face for clues. "How did it go?" she asked. "I think it went the way it needed to," I said. "I said what I needed to say, and I'm done. I'm finally done."
She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Good, that's good. Now let's go home. I nodded and started the car. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked in the rear view mirror at the hospital disappearing behind me. It was strange, but I felt a sense of peace.
Not forgiveness, not entirely, but a sense of closure. The drive back to Sarah's apartment was quiet. I was lost in thought, processing everything that had happened. I thought about Mark, about his confession, about the years of pain he had carried. I thought about Logan, about his selfishness, his abandonment. I thought about the woman I had been, the woman who had been so focused on building a life with someone who couldn't be who she needed him to be. And I thought about the woman I was becoming, stronger, wiser, more resilient. The betrayal had broken me, but it had also rebuilt me. I was no longer the naive, trusting girl who believed in fairy tales. I was a woman who had been to the brink and back, a woman who knew her own worth. It was a long, slow process, but the healing continued. Sarah was there for me, every step of the way. She dragged me out of the house when I wanted to hide. She made me laugh when I wanted to cry. She reminded me that I was more than the sum of my broken parts. I threw myself into my work, finding purpose and satisfaction in the projects I had once found tedious. I started running again, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement a form of meditation. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage, and I made new ones. And slowly, I started to find myself again. Not the self I had been before the betrayal, but a new self. A self that had been forged in the fires of heartbreak and emerged stronger, braver, more authentic. Months passed. The divorce became a distant memory, a scar on my heart that had faded with time. I didn't think about Mark every day anymore. I didn't think about Logan at all. They had become ghosts, echoes of a past that no longer defined me. One evening, I was sitting in a small cafe near my new apartment, a cozy one-bedroom I had found in a neighborhood I'd always loved. I was reading a book, sipping a latte, enjoying the simple pleasure of a quiet evening. And then I saw him. He was sitting at a table across the room, a cup of coffee in front of him, his head bent over a laptop. He was handsome, in a quiet, unassuming way. Dark hair, warm eyes, a gentle smile. He looked up, and our eyes met. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his name, but something about him felt familiar, safe. He smiled at me, a shy, tentative smile, and I felt a flutter in my chest. It was a small thing, a tiny spark of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. I smiled back, and I knew, in that moment, that I was going to be okay. Not just okay. Happy. I was going to be happy. I had survived the storm, and I had come out the other side. I was whole. I was free. And I was ready for whatever came next. The story of my marriage was over, but my story was just beginning.